Have you talked about the budget in school?
It's hard to keep everyone happy with the federal budget.
3 against 1, give us a cat.
I'm not sure if we can afford a cat.
But as Angela Finch sat down to watch the Treasurer's speech last night,
today the reality is very different.
she was hoping the government's rhetoric about helping low-income women would pay some dividends for her.
I would like to see carers payments and parenting payments go up, better mental health sector.
As reporters pored over the papers in the budget lockup, the pitch to women began to take shape. Lower thresholds for compulsory superannuation, childcare subsidies, a new scheme for single parents to buy houses with tiny deposits. And there were substantial measures on mental health.
I commend the budget to the House.
I'm not quite sure they were calling it the women's budget though. Other than the housing package, the loan scheme, there's nothing in there for single parent families like mine who are living on the single parenting income support support payment.
The measures in the budget that deal with costs of living, things like the tax cuts and the policies on housing, they are only going to be helping people who have got jobs and who have reasonable enough incomes to be able to afford to be pitching for home ownership. Let's remember that the bottom 30% of households don't get any benefit from a tax cut because their incomes are too low. And so that's very gendered. We've got 1 in 3 single parents living below the poverty line. 95% of single parents are women.
Half of my income goes on the rent. I don't know any single parents in the situation that could take it up. I'm sure there are some out there and it will be great and probably life-changing for them, but I don't think it's, again, looking at the structures in place and the barriers for single-parent families.
The budget's political job is to get key messages out to particular constituencies. This year, for example, women and voters concerned about aged care. And the $17.7 billion package of reforms to our aged care sector was the key feature of last night's budget.
We are committed to restoring trust in the system and allowing Australians to age with dignity and respect.
There will be an extra 80,000 in-home care packages over the next 2 years. And in residential care, which was savaged during the recent Royal Commission into the industry, carers will need to spend more time with residents. Happy birthday to you. In the garden he's tended to for most of his life, Brian Kelly last year celebrated his 91st birthday.
Thanks, Christine and everybody for coming.
91 today.
I feel like the Pope blessing you all.
Thank you, Padre. Padre.
Dad his health started to decline rapidly, very rapidly. Last year, Dad had 12 trips in an ambulance to emergency.
Brian was adamant he wanted to remain in his Sydney home. He was getting some help, but with his health deteriorating, he applied for the highest level of care package available, level 4, and he was approved. However, like many older Australians, there was a wait for the funding to actually flow, and the family ran out of time.
Ironically, the day that we had to put him into permanent care, his level 4 package came through. And this is where the system fails. When you need it, it's not there for you. And I think $17.7 billion yesterday in the budget, great, it needs more. The whole aged care system needs reform and more. And how, as a society, do we want our elderly to age?
Brian says he's now comfortable living in aged care.
Oh yes, I need a lot of help though. Maybe for mobility. That's my problem, as well as the eyes.
Media coverage often reduces the budget to a simple list of winners and losers. But the budget also lays out the broader picture about the economic outlook, and it is hard to think of a time when people were more concerned to know what that was. The budget paints a rosy economic picture this year, built on the back of continued government spending and household consumption. But the government support falls away in 2022, and the optimistic growth forecast for the economy is also predicated on the unlikely scenario that most people in Australia will be vaccinated by the end of this year. 4% next year, but I mean, that's sort of falling off.
You just can't keep going as fast, though. Right?
No,
You can't.
I think there is an inevitability around the fact that growth will drop off from a very high growth rate of 4.25%. We spent a lot of money in terms of pumping stimulus into the economy last year, but that kind of growth can't sustain itself over the longer term, and particularly can't sustain itself without our usual way of stimulating growth, which is through the arrival of new people into the economy as well.
And how sensitive is all of this to the opening up of the borders and population growth figures?
To be honest, though, across the next 3 or 4 years, not that sensitive. Partly because there's redirection of funds that Australians would spend overseas. It's worth a net $20 billion to this economy, so it actually doesn't hurt you that much. It hurts some sectors, but not in aggregate. Sure.
That hurt will be felt in the absence of migration and international students, and will really start to bite next year. While some local tourist destinations are booming, others continue to struggle while Australia's borders remain closed. Anthea Hammond and her brother David run the world's steepest passenger railway, the Scenic Railway, which used to host travellers from across the globe.
We're still looking at a good 12, possibly 18 months, based on border closures before we see any real internationals come back. It's not worth us being open midweek anymore. We simply can't afford to cover our wage costs and our opening costs in the middle of the week.
With only domestic guests, the railway is only open 4 days a week, and its workforce is down by a third.
JobKeeper kept 3.8 million people in their job.
Yes, it did.
We know that some sectors and regions across the country continue to do it tough.
That is why this budget provides a further $2.1 billion in targeted support for aviation, tourism, the arts and international education providers.
But it's money they already have committed in the last month and a half.
That's nothing for us to eat.
Sitting here with my brother, we were a bit hopeful because Frydenberg had said a number of times what the government had already announced and said, but we're going to go further. And we were waiting for it, and it didn't happen. If we don't have these businesses at the end of the pandemic, and there's a real risk of that around the country, losing some of our core attractions, then we're not going to be able to attract visitors back, and the recovery will be slower at the end of this.
Josh Frydenberg's budget is focused on getting us through 2021 and the next election. But already, plenty of Australians want to know what the government is willing to expose us to after that.
Hi, I'm Lee Sales. Thanks for watching this story. If you'd like to watch more of 730's stories, they are on the left of your screen. And tap on the button below to subscribe and get the latest from ABC News.